You ever notice something weird when you are sitting in traffic? Look around at all these brand new trucks and SUVs everywhere, vehicles that cost more than most people make in a year. And here is the kicker. The person driving that $75,000 Ford F-150, with all the bells and whistles, probably makes less money than you do. Way less. So what is going on here? How is your neighbor affording a truck payment that is higher than your rent while simultaneously complaining about the price of eggs? I am Leo, and I spend an unhealthy amount of time analyzing why people make terrible financial decisions. And trust me, after looking at the numbers behind modern car buying, I've discovered something that is going to change how you see every vehicle on the road. If you've ever wondered how regular people are dropping $1,000 plus every month on car payments, buckle up, because what I am about to show you is equal parts genius and absolutely insane. Let me start with a number that is going to sound fake. The average new car payment in America has crossed $700 per month. $700. And that is just the average for trucks and SUVs, which, let's be honest, basically everyone drives now. We're talking $900, $1,000, sometimes $1,200 per month, every single month for 6, 7, sometimes 8 years. Now, your first thought might be, well, Leo, maybe people are just making more money these days. And I wish that were true. I really do. But median household income has not kept pace with these insane payment amounts, not even close. So how are regular folks, teachers, nurses, retail workers, people with completely normal jobs, somehow making the math work on these payments that should be mathematically impossible? The answer is both simpler and more disturbing than you think. They're not actually affording these vehicles. They're participating in an elaborate financial shell game that the auto industry has perfected over decades. And once you understand how this game works, you'll never look at car buying the same way again. Let me introduce you to the first trick. Stretched loan terms that would make your grandparents' heads spin. Remember when car loans were 3, maybe 4 years max? Those days are dead and buried. Today's car loans routinely stretch 6, 7, 8 years into the future. Some lenders are even offering 10-year car loans. 10 years. That is longer than most marriages last. Here is how this works in practice. Say you want that shiny $60,000 truck. If you finance it over 4 years at 6% interest, your monthly payment is going to be around $1,400. That is brutal. Most people can't swing that. But watch what happens when we stretch that same loan to 8 years. Suddenly your payment drops to about $850 per month. Magic, right? The monthly number looks way more manageable. You can actually convince yourself this is doable. But here's what the dealership isn't highlighting on that big screen they're showing you. By stretching the loan to 8 years, you are not just lowering the payment. You are fundamentally changing the economics of the deal. That $850 payment over 96 months adds up to $81,600. Compare that to the 4-year loan at $67,200, and you've just paid an extra $14,400 for the exact same truck. That is a used car's worth of money you are throwing away just to make the monthly number look prettier. And it gets worse. Way worse. Because cars depreciate like crazy, especially in those first few years. By year 5 of your 8-year loan, you are going to owe significantly more than the truck is worth. You'll be trapped in what is called negative equity underwater on a depreciating asset. You can't sell it without writing a check to cover the difference. You can't trade it in without rolling that negative equity into your next loan. You are stuck. Which brings me to trick number 2. The negative equity cycle that keeps people trapped forever. Here is how this nightmare plays out. Someone buys a new truck with a 7-year loan. After 3 or 4 years, they're tired of it, or it needs expensive repairs, or they just want something newer, but they still owe $35,000 on a truck that is now worth $25,000. They're $10,000 underwater. So what do dealers do? They roll that negative equity into the new loan. You want a new $65,000 truck. Great. We'll give you $25,000 for your trade. Add that to the $65,000 you are borrowing, and boom, you are now financing $75,000 on a $65,000 truck. Your loan balance just increased even though you are making payments. It is like financial quicksand. The more you struggle, the deeper you sink. And here is the truly evil genius of this system. It creates customers for life. Once you are trapped in the negative equity cycle, you can never escape without writing a big check. So you keep trading. Keep rolling over that debt. Keep extending those loan terms. The dealers love it because you are a guaranteed repeat customer. You hate it but can't see a way out. Now let's talk about trick number 3, the 0% financing scam that sounds too good to be true. Because it is. Walk into any dealership and you'll see giant banners screaming, 0% APR for qualified buyers. Free money. What could go wrong? Here is what they don't tell you in big letters. You are either getting 0% financing, OR, you are getting a discount on the truck, but you are never getting both. That 0% interest rate isn't free. The cost is baked into the vehicle price. They're not giving you free money. They're just hiding the interest in a higher purchase price. Plus, those 0% offers usually come with strict qualification requirements and shorter loan terms. The people who actually qualify are typically the ones who could afford to pay cash anyway. For everyone else, the people who actually need financing help, you are looking at interest rates between 5% and 10%. Sometimes higher if your credit isn't perfect. On a $60,000 loan over 7 years, the difference between 0% and 7% interest is over $14,000. That is real money being burned for nothing. But the most fascinating part of this whole system isn't the financial engineering. It is the psychology. Because here is the thing. The auto industry has spent billions of dollars figuring out how to tap into your deepest insecurities and desires. They're not selling transportation anymore. They're selling identity. That truck commercial showing a rugged dude hauling lumber through mountain trails isn't selling you a vehicle. It is selling you a fantasy about who you are as a person. It is telling you that real men drive trucks. That successful people drive new vehicles. That your worth as a human being is somehow connected to what you are driving. And if you are not behind the wheel of something impressive, what does that say about you? This is automotive Stockholm Syndrome at its finest. People develop emotional attachments to financial decisions that are actively harming them. The truck isn't just transportation. It is an extension of their identity. Suggesting they drive something cheaper feels like a personal attack on their self-worth. I've seen people defend their $1,100 truck payment with more passion than they defend their own families. They'll tell you they need a full-size truck for the twice-yearly trip to Home Depot. They deserve a nice vehicle because they work hard. They can't afford to drive something unreliable, even though their brand new truck is literally preventing them from building any financial security. And this is where the real sacrifices start showing up. Because even with all these tricks, extended terms, rolled equity, emotional manipulation, $900 to $1,200 per month is still a huge chunk of money for most people. So how are they making it work in their actual budgets? The answer is disturbing. They're restructuring their entire financial lives around their car payment. I've seen people stay in smaller apartments or live with roommates years longer than planned just to afford their dream truck. They'll eat rice and beans for dinner every night while driving to work in a vehicle that costs more than some houses. They skip vacations, avoid restaurants, put off other purchases, all to support a car payment that consumes 25 to 35% of their take-home income. Some people take on second jobs specifically to cover vehicle expenses. They'll drive for Uber or deliver food on weekends, using their expensive truck to generate the income needed to pay for that same expensive truck. It is like being enslaved to your own vehicle. The truck becomes both your master and your means of survival. Others are doing even more desperate things. I've seen people take loans against their 400 wunk to make down payments. They're borrowing from their retirement, their future self, to fund their current automotive fantasy. And because most people are terrible at calculating the true cost of early retirement withdrawals, they don't realize they're potentially sacrificing hundreds of thousands in future wealth for a truck that'll be worth basically nothing in 10 years. Then there is the credit card shuffle that is becoming increasingly common. People put maintenance, repairs, insurance, and fuel on credit cards to free up cash for the monthly car payment. They're using high-interest debt to subsidize transportation costs. That is like using a flamethrower to light a birthday candle. Technically, it works. But it is probably not the smartest approach. Let me hit you with some math that'll make your stomach turn. Let's take a typical scenario. Someone buys a $58,000 truck with a 7-year loan at 6.5% interest. Monthly payment works out to about $875. Over 7 years, they'll pay approximately $73,500 total. That is $15,500 in interest alone. But wait, we're just getting started. Add in insurance at $220 per month, because insuring an expensive truck costs way more than a basic sedan. And that is another $18,500 over 7 years. Factor in fuel costs at $320 monthly for a truck getting 17 mpg in real-world driving, and we're talking about $26,880 more. Maintenance and repairs over 7 years will easily run $12,000. Probably more when you add it all up. This person is spending $130,880 on transportation over 7 years. And at the end of those 7 years, they'll own a vehicle worth maybe $18,000 if they're lucky. They just paid $131,000 for the privilege of eventually owning an $18,000 truck. That is not transportation financing. That is wealth destruction with heated seats and a backup camera. Here's the part that makes me want to scream into a pillow. What that same money could accomplish if invested instead. If someone took that $875 monthly payment and put it into a simple index fund averaging 8% annual returns, after 7 years they'd have over $78,000. Not only would they have avoided the financial burden of the truck, they'd have actually built real wealth instead of destroying it. But understanding this requires thinking about opportunity cost, and most people never make it that far. They see the $875 payment and think, can I afford this monthly? They never ask, what am I giving up by making this choice? They don't calculate what that money could become over time. They just focus on whether they can technically make the payment without defaulting. The insurance costs alone on these massive vehicles are enough to make you weep. Comprehensive coverage, collision, gap insurance, and all the other protections you need for an expensive vehicle can easily run $250 plus per month. For families with multiple expensive vehicles, insurance costs can hit $500 or $600 monthly. That is $7,200 per year just for the legal right to drive your depreciating assets on public roads. And maintenance, oh boy. Modern trucks are incredibly complex machines with advanced technology, sophisticated emission systems, and premium components. When something breaks, and it will break, the repair bills are astronomical. A simple brake job can run $900 to $1,400. Transmission problems can cost $6,000 or more. Need major engine work. You might be looking at $12,000 plus. The people making these extreme car payments usually have zero emergency fund for repairs, which means they're putting major maintenance on credit cards or taking out additional loans. This creates a vicious debt spiral where the manageable car payment becomes the catalyst for financial destruction that takes years to recover from. I've seen people with pristine $72,000 trucks in their driveways while they're desperately searching couch cushions for gas money. It is like wearing a Rolex watch while living on ramen noodles. Technically impressive, but completely missing the point. The normalization of these extreme payments is probably the most disturbing trend. People who would never spend $1,100 per month on anything else somehow convince themselves it is reasonable for a vehicle. If someone told you they spent $1,100 monthly on coffee, you'd stage an intervention. If they dropped that much on clothes every month, you'd assume they had a serious problem. But when it is a car payment, we just nod and say, well, you need reliable transportation. This didn't happen by accident. It is the result of decades of marketing convincing Americans that vehicles are extensions of identity, that what you drive says something fundamental about who you are as a person. The auto industry has become incredibly sophisticated at triggering these psychological responses and converting them into loan signatures. And here is the cruelest part of this entire system. The people who can least afford to waste money on terrible financial decisions are exactly the ones most likely to fall into this trap. If you are stretching to afford these payments, you are probably already stressed about money. You are not in an optimal mental state to objectively evaluate whether this truck is helping or hurting your financial future. You see the deposits in your account and feel productive. You don't see the invisible costs accumulating, the retirement you are not funding, the emergency fund you are not building, the investments you are not making, the opportunities you are missing, because every dollar is already committed to your truck payment. The worst part, many people aren't just doing this for one vehicle. The average American household now owns more cars than licensed drivers. It is not uncommon to find families with 2 or 3 car payments running simultaneously. combined payments that exceed their mortgage or rent. They've essentially created their own personal auto financing company. Except instead of making money, they're losing it catastrophically every single month. So what is the actual solution here? How do you escape this trap? First, you have to recognize it for what it is. This isn't about being smart or dumb. It is about understanding that there is an entire system designed to separate you from your money while making you feel good about it. Once you see that system clearly, you can start making different choices. Stop measuring vehicle affordability by monthly payment. Start calculating total cost of ownership over the life of the loan. Purchase price, interest, insurance, fuel, maintenance, everything. Then compare that total to what the vehicle will actually be worth when you are done paying for it. The gap between those numbers is your wealth destruction amount. Question whether you actually need that truck or SUV. Most people buying full-size trucks use the bed maybe twice a year. You don't need a $65,000 vehicle to commute to an office job. You've been sold a lifestyle fantasy that is costing you tens of thousands of dollars. Buy used and buy boring. A 3-year-old Toyota Camry with 35,000 miles will get you to work just as effectively as a brand new loaded truck, but it'll cost you probably $300 per month instead of $1,100. That $800 monthly difference invested over 7 years becomes $78,000. That is real wealth you are building instead of destroying. Break the negative equity cycle by driving your current vehicle into the ground. Yes, it is boring. Yes, your neighbors might judge you. Who cares? They're broke, and you are building wealth. In 10 years, you'll have investment accounts while they're still trapped in car payment hell. The next time you see someone driving a vehicle that costs more than your annual salary, remember, they're probably eating cereal for dinner to afford it. That shiny truck represents sacrifice, stress, and destroyed wealth, not success. And that reliable used car in your driveway that you paid cash for, that is what actual financial intelligence looks like. Your car should get you from point A to point B as cheaply and reliably as possible. Anything beyond that is ego. And ego is expensive. Stop letting auto manufacturers rent space in your brain to convince you that your self-worth is tied to what you drive. It is not. And the sooner you internalize that truth, the sooner you can start building real wealth instead of just looking like you have it. If this changed how you think about car buying, smash that like button and subscribe. I break down the psychological traps keeping you broke every week. Let's figure this money thing out together. I am not a financial advisor, mortgage expert, or licensed financial professional. The content on this channel represents personal opinions only and is intended for educational and entertainment purposes. Please conduct your own research and seek professional guidance before making any major financial decisions. See you next time.